So like I said, I read 18 pages. Did not read 18 pages. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my February wrap up. So in the month of February, I don't even really know what happened. It was my best reading month, I think, ever. Honestly, looking at the number of books that I read, I'm pretty sure this is my highest amount of books read. So, like, I don't know what happened. It was also a very chaotic, random assortment of reads that I planned, and like also just random mood reads that hit at random times. So it is a hodgepodge of a lot of stuff. But I ended up reading 18 books in February, and like I said, I don't know what happened. Good things happened, but it was not what I expected. I read way more than I thought I was going to because I had a couple of things that I was doing outside of Booktube, and then I also had a special like TBR video that you guys would have seen at this point that I was trying to do as well. So it just, all of the odds were against me, and I still somehow ended up reading a lot of really, really good things. So yeah, let's just get right into it. I will chapter this video as I usually do if there's a specific book or a few books that you were really wanting to know my thoughts on, but let's jump right into the stats. So like I mentioned, I read 18 books, and of those 18 books, I read a total of 6,178 pages. I thought I'd also include a new stat starting this month is in the spreadsheet that I use, which is the Copal spreadsheet. There is the hours listened, because I do listen to mostly, not 100% of my books, but most of my books on audio. So I wanted to include that stat here. I thought that would be kind of fun. But of all of those books, I listened to 172.5 hours. Which is crazy. And those all kind of broke down into 7 audiobooks, 1 physical book, 1 ebook, and 9 mixed books, or mixed from the above. And then my age categories are pretty, this is very telling of the month that I had. I read 1 middle grade, 2 YA, 1 new adult, and 14 adult books. And then genres are pretty slim this month too. Again, I clearly had a theme I was going for because I read 14 romance books, 1 contemporary, and 3 fantasy. And then star ratings were relatively normal for me. I had 7 5 stars, 9 4 stars, 1 3 star, and I did have a DNF as well. The first book that I ended up picking up in February was a random mood read. I just like felt the urge to pick this one up. And it really started off the month, like really just accepting the fact that I was going to mood read where I wanted to, and you will see it kind of went a little crazy later on. But I picked up It's in His Kiss by Julia Quinn, which is the 7th book in the Bridgerton series, and this one follows Hyacinth Bridgerton, who is the 7th. Actually, no, I think she's the youngest, if I am correct, of the Bridgertons. And we have 1 more book left in the Bridgerton series, and I am so excited and also really terrified to like actually finish it because I loved this series. But this one follows Hyacinth and a guy named Gareth St. Clair. And Gareth has a very strained relationship with his father, and there's like this big thing between the two of them. And he is bequested this old family diary that he's thinking will lead them in certain directions. Maybe he'll learn a little bit about his history, but it's in Italian and he doesn't speak Italian. So he teams up with Hyacinth, who does speak not great Italian, but some Italian, and it's their story. So we haven't seen Hyacinth a lot in the past books. I mean, she does kind of show up in some of the ones right before this one, so like Eloise's story a little bit, Colin's story, things like that. But she's basically only ever described as like a very strong personality, kind of gets in the way of a lot of things, is very, very stubborn, and like once she has her mind set on something, she's not gonna like leave it alone until she gathers that information or does the thing or whatever it is. So it was really interesting to see her story because now I think at this point she is 24, maybe. She's definitely in her like early to mid 20s, so she's definitely grown up, And this was really fun for me personally, because like I've seen a lot of books here recently where the main character is very strong-willed, very intent on what they think of the world, and then by the end of the book they become a little bit less of that, whereas in this one that didn't happen. It felt like she was fully herself. We got to see her the entire time, and we got to see this guy who just kind of accepted that fact about her and really loved that fact about her. And it was really, really sweet, because I loved seeing that like she didn't compromise who she was as a person for like the relationship she wanted to be in. So I really appreciated that. I think it was really cute to see these two together. This is probably one of my top Bridgerton books at this point, just because I wasn't sure what to expect going into this, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff in here that is, I don't know, just like it was really cute. It made me really happy. And these last few are ones that like I don't know these Bridgerton siblings very well. Like the very last one's about George, and I feel like I don't know anything about him, whereas Hyacinth was kind of peppered into some of the stories, so you get an idea of who she is, but it was really nice to see her kind of take center stage in this story. So I really enjoyed it. There were some things that made me a little iffy, so like some of Gareth's motivations for why he was doing certain things wasn't my favorite. Like nothing was, I don't even know how to explain it. Like there wasn't anything in here that was outright, you know, non-consensual or something like that, but just some of the motivations he had for certain things made me a little iffy on some of the situations. But overall, it was a pretty decent book. I ended up giving it this one 4.5 stars. It is not my favorite of the Bridgertons, but it's also not my least favorite, so I do really enjoy this one. And I'm really glad that I read it, because I wasn't really expecting anything from it, and it ended up being like a really, really good book. So yes, I really love the Bridgertons, and this one was really cool because we got to see the character of Lady Danbury significantly more in this plot. Like she was a lot of Colin's story, but she was a lot in this story. And I just really love her as a character. I think she's really fun. And so I love just seeing all the little like layers and the aspects to this book. So yeah, this is a good one. The next one was just another kind of random one that I picked up, and that is Miss Lattimore's Letter, and it is by Susanna Allen. This is a book that was kind of part of my cleaning out my NetGalley shelf, because this was an arc that I had from like, I don't even remember when it came out. It's been a hot second, so very, very late, but I was trying to clean out my NetGalley shelf this year, and so this was just one of the ones that was on it, and the audiobook became available at my library, so I said, why not? So I do have a full-on Goodreads review of this. I will make sure I leave the link to that down below if you'd like to check out more of my thoughts, but this is perfect for people who love the stories and kind of the social commentary of Jane Austen, because it had a lot of that in it. This was very heavily, I think, you could tell it was heavily based on Jane Austen, primarily Pride and Prejudice, especially down to the very end. I felt like parts of it were ripped straight from Pride and Prejudice. But it was really cool because it follows this character named Sophie, who's kind of thought of as like a wildflower. She's kind of hiding back. She lives with her, I believe it's her aunt, and her cousin is supposed to be like the toast of the season, and so her aunt is so focused on getting her cousin to have like a really decent match. And so Sophie is just kind of hiding in the background. She's now just been kind of assumed to be one of the spinsters at this point. And so because of that, she stumbles into certain situations, and she stumbles into a couple having not necessarily an argument, but a discussion at a party, and she discovers that these two couples are kind of forced with people that they don't want to be with. And so she writes an anonymous letter hoping to like just be like, look, this is a thing that I learned. In my humble opinion, you would be better matched with this person. And so because of that, it gets out that she's the one who wrote it, and so of course everyone starts coming to her for help. And one of them happens to be, oh, I forgot his name, but he basically comes to her in the hopes that she'll help him find someone for him to marry, because he's kind of accepted the fact that he needs to marry someone now, and he's very reminiscent of Mr. Darcy. So she kind of helps him out, and while she's doing this, she's really falling hard for him. And so that's just kind of the general gist of things. And then of course shenanigans ensue because everyone's coming to her, and it's a whole mess. But it was surprisingly good. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. As I was reading it, I was like, this is just kind of okay, but having given myself some time from when I read it to now, I think it's actually like a really good book. And so this author writes really short things. So like I was able to finish this in one day. So it was really, really short. And I think it was really cool because parts of it were good, like really good. Like for example, the aunt character is very reminiscent of Mrs. Bennet, but she kind of has a character arc throughout this, which you don't realize you're kind of falling for her as a person until the end, and then you're like, wait a second, I care about this person, and you kind of see her development. But then at the same time, you've got a lot of characters that are very like two-dimensional and don't have a lot of things like fleshed out. So it just kind of depends on the character, but overall, I think this was quite good. I didn't realize how reminiscent of, you know, Pride and Prejudice it was going to be until I'd gotten enough basically to the end. But yeah, if you're a Jane Austen fan, then like this is definitely a book for you. So the next 3 I'm gonna kind of lump together a little bit because it is the first 3 in the Rajay's series by Sonali Dev. This is a series of romances that follows one family, the Rajays, and each of them is a different romance, and each of them is based on a different, very loosely based on a different Jane Austen story. So the first one is Pride and Prejudice and Other Flavors, obviously it's based on Pride and Prejudice. We have Recipe for Persuasion based on Persuasion, and then Innocence and Sensibility based on Sense and Sensibility. So I had plans to pick up Pride and Prejudice and Other Flavors this month because I had the first 2 in this series, and the 4th one is coming out this year, I believe in May sometime, and so I wanted to start this series to see if it was something that I was really going to enjoy. So I plowed through this in, I'm not even kidding you, I think 2 days. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. Each of these do have separate, I would say, trigger warnings. So this one primarily has miscarriages and police brutality as kind of triggers or content warnings, so just as a heads up for those. But it does follow our main character Trisha, who's a doctor, and she and this caterer who caters her big family, like a big family gathering at one point, they get off on the wrong foot, and then they end up having to work together because her sister is supposed to be putting together this big I think it's supposed to be a big fundraiser, and she can't do it for certain reasons, and so Trisha steps in, so the 2 of them really don't like each other, and then they come to, you know, have more feelings for one another. So on the back here it says that this family is an overachieving Indian American family, and I would agree with that, especially because like there's parts of it that like historically they come from Indian royalty, I think, so they are very higher up as far as like money wise. So like her older brother is running for political office, and so like all of her family is like these bigger names and like more I guess in the public eye, where she is, yes, she's a doctor, so she's like really up there as far as money wise, but like she's not as in the public eye as some of her family is. But I really enjoyed this. I think it's really interesting because each of these books has a different family member that is the forefront of the story, but they each deal with something very important. So this one, as far as like the themes of it, it really focuses on social class between our 2 characters, because not only is that a big thing as far as like money wise, there's also some situations, especially with the like being pulled over by police, because our main male lead, whose name is DJ, is darker skinned, and so because of that he gets pulled over by police, and because she has the Rajay name attached to her, she's never had to deal with that before, and so you just get some of these very eye-opening situations. So I thought it was very interesting to have these stories really kind of highlight something socially important, but at the same time they're still fun romances that have their very fluffy moments, and like they're so sweet, and I love them all. I love this family so much. So we've got that one with the first one. The second one, Recipe for Persuasion, follows one of the cousins, Ashna, and she ends up going on this cooking show which is like a professional cook gets teamed up with a celebrity of sorts, and it's a competition style show. And so she gets teamed up with this guy who just retired from soccer, who she actually previously dated in high school. So it's their conversation, and this one primarily focuses as far as trigger and content warnings, this one heavily talks about suicide, and there is instances of conversations about rape and sexual assault as well. So this one has a lot to do with our main character and her mother. They have a very strained relationship, so that's really important. Plus, she, I believe, deals with a lot of anxiety. It doesn't say it's on the page, but she hates being in front of the camera. She kind of has, I would say, a couple of different panic attacks throughout this book, so you get to see that aspect of it. And this one I gave 5 stars because out of these 3, this one is my favorite. I just adored this couple, and I'm not sure why this is the one that stuck out to me the most, but I think I loved this second chance romance of these 2 characters and how they really grew with each other. And all of these are such adult relationships in the sense of, like, if there's an issue, we're going to talk about the issue. We're not just going to sweep it under the rug and deal with it later. It's like they sit down and have conversations, which I really appreciate. And I just fell head over heels for this couple. And then the third one, Incense and Sensibility, follows the oldest brother, Yash, who is the one that I mentioned was running for public office. And something happens at the very, very beginning of this book that is very, very traumatic for the main character. He's at a political campaign rally, and so I would say trigger warnings for shootings, panic attacks, and just general trauma from those things, because he's dealing with a lot of, I would say, PTSD-like symptoms. And so the cousin in this one, Yashna, has a friend named India who runs a yoga studio and just general, like, life health stuff, because I think she also makes incense and just helps people in general. And so she helped Yashna with her anxiety and stuff, and so they suggest that he starts going to her. However, they had a thing in the past, so this one's also a second chance romance of sorts, but it was really cute. And I think this one had out of these 3, this one had the toughest social commentary aspects to it, but at the same time, you're sitting there and you want to keep reading because you want to see how these characters, you know, deal with whatever issue it is that they're talking about, and at the same time, you were like butterflies for these characters. I don't know how she does this. It's incredible. So I read one thinking, oh, this is going to be really, really, really cool, and then the next thing I knew, I had finished the second one, and I was literally at the bookstore buying the third one. So I powered through this series like nobody's business. I think I forgot to tell you, this one got 4 stars as well. So I'm a huge fan of this one. If you like romances that are not necessarily smutty romances, because these are definitely not that, but if you like those slow burn romances with a lot of, like, more plot to it, so like social commentary and all of these for different things, then this is the person, or like this is the series that you definitely need to check out. Or if you're like a huge Jane Austen fan and you just want to see a different version of all of these stories, I highly, highly, highly recommend, because I mean, like, I binged this series in a week. I feel like that should say something. Oh, that was aggressive. The next one that I picked up was my Tessadair buddy read, which is A Lady by Midnight. This is the, I believe, third in the Spindle Cove series, which I've been buddy reading with my friends Taylor and Brooke, as I mentioned, literally every single month. So this is just the newest one that we have picked up. And this one is part of the Spindle Cove series, like I mentioned, and that's a series that basically just takes place in this place called Spindle Cove, and it's where ladies go to escape society, basically. So this one follows our main character, Kate, who has basically grown up accepting the fact that she's kind of a little bit of a nobody. She's not a lady, she's basically here just to help out, she'll never find true love, that kind of thing. And then there's this guy named Corporal Thorne, who was part of the militia in the town, and he is very stoic, very cold, very quiet, kind of keeps to his own. And then one day, a couple of people come searching for Kate, and they have a couple of answers to her past, and Thorne doesn't really believe them, so he steps in and pretends to be her fiance to kind of protect her. And it's the two of them as they unravel the secrets of her past, because he is involved as well. And this was just I mean, this one is my favorite in the series, so up to this point. I gave it 4 stars. I think it was significantly better than some of the past books. I did feel like our characters' relationship was actually believable, which I couldn't say about the past few. And I loved this mysterious element that surrounded them, because there was a lot of secrets between the two of them. Thorn has a past as well, and so I liked unraveling what the truth actually was throughout the story. I loved the genuine kind of caring that the two had for each other, even if they didn't want it to be there. It was there, and so they genuinely cared for one another, and it was just like, it was honestly really, really cute. And the last scene was like chef's kiss, one of my favorites I've read. It was so freaking cute. I really, really enjoyed this one. I will say trigger warnings for trauma and PTSD, because Thorn has a little bit of PTSD throughout this book. It's not heavily touched on, but it is there, so I did want to mention it. Now, I will say, this is not particularly a happy story. Like, it does have all the aspects that you would expect from a historical romance. It did have a lot of very, very cute moments, but the story as a whole did focus on not very happy things from people's pasts. And so it was really tough to read at times, because you're just kind of like breaking for these characters. But again, I loved the connection between the two of them. I thought it was super cute. I tabbed it like crazy, and y'all know when I tab like crazy, it usually means it's pretty good. So, is this series getting better? I think so, with each book, but it starts off rough. It really does. I could dive into like, her writing has gotten better as she's continued to write more. It could be a location thing. I don't know. But as we continue with the Spindle Cove specifically, it just gets better and better. So this was 4 stars. I really adored it. I love these two characters. They had so many really cute and sweet scenes, and heartbreak and love all at the same time. Like, seriously, this had it all. The next book is the one that I ended up DNFing, and that is The Betrothed by Kira Cass. So this is the first, and I believe it's her Betrothed duology, I believe is what it's called. I made it about 45% of the way through, and I think I've just grown out of what this author can offer, because like, I read the Selection series right before I think I started my YouTube channel, or right around there, and I really loved it, and I still have like very fond memories of that series, but I'm never going to reread them, because I'm afraid if I reread them I won't like them, because this had a very, very young writing style, which is fine, except for that, like, that's not my thing anymore. So I couldn't get behind these characters. I realized, again, I was 45% of the way through, and I was quite literally forcing myself to finish. I didn't care what happened to these characters at all, because we're basically following this girl, and she's in the court of this king, and the king is supposed to be choosing a bride for the future, and he has favorites that it's very reminiscent of like King Henry VIII, to be honest, minus all the death. But like, he has favorites, and it goes back and forth, and so at the beginning of this book she starts to become his favorite, and she doesn't think very much of that at the time, because she doesn't think that it'll last because he's had so many favorites, and then he actually starts to like bring her into like important meetings and stuff like that. But I even went online after I decided I was done. I was like, I don't care. I had like 0 interest in the story anymore, and I went online and I read like a spoiler review, not review, but like synopsis of what actually ended up happening in this book, and I don't care. It wouldn't have been worth it for me. I feel like there were parts that it was trying to hint at, and I just didn't see it. Like, based on what I know happens at the end, there were things that I was like, I feel like that for being almost halfway through this book, things were not progressing as well as I think they should have been. I don't know. It wasn't for me, and I understand why people are not the biggest fans of this book, and I think it's an age thing. I think if I was in high school right now, I would absolutely adore this series, because I do love books based on monarchs, and I just think this would have been right up my alley. I think I've outgrown this author, I think, is where we're at. Cool. So, will I keep my eye out for other things by her? Absolutely. Maybe she'll have something that really speaks to me. I'm willing to give her as many chances, because I do really have fond memories of like her stuff in the past. this is just not one of them. So this was on my list of books to read by the end of 2022, but this is a DNF, unfortunately, for me, and I'm probably going to unhaul this. Honestly, I've been holding out for it so that I could do this wrap up, and now it's going to go away. But yeah, unfortunately this didn't work for me, but that's okay. So the next one that I ended up picking up was the 6th volume of Dreaming Sun by Ichigo Taganu. So this is a series that I've been reading for quite a while now, and there are 10 volumes. I do have them all, and I'm hoping to get through them this year. I think I'm on a pretty good pace considering that this is the 6th one and I have the 7th one on my TBR for March. I think I can do it. But as I've said many times, this is a series that follows a girl named Shimana, and it basically is her moving into this house with some guys that she used to go, or she goes to school with, and it's a very like coming of age, finding your own people kind of situation. So this is just the newest volume that I hadn't read yet, and I ended up giving this one, I think, 4 stars, though I'm pretty sure this one might jump down to a 3.5 after having thought about it for a little bit, because while it's significantly better than the 5th one, which you guys know I really didn't like, it still is that plot line that I really don't like. We're still continuing that plot line. Some of the aspects that I was really against aren't in this one, but the plot line is still here, and it's not a plot line that I enjoy. And I'm being very vague because I don't want to spoil anything about this series, obviously, but like it's, I don't know, there's just this plot line with the landlord character, and I really don't like it. And also, like, the ending, I was confused through most of this book. I'm not gonna lie, like, I know what happened, but I'm very confused by a couple of the characters' motivations and why they did specific things. Like, I think it's the guy right here on the cover has a very distinct plan and like what he wants to see happen. Or maybe it's not him, maybe it's somebody else. I don't know. There's one of these like older guys that is trying to help one of the characters, but the character doesn't actually want their help, they're just doing it anyway. So there's just a lot of confusion going on here. But there is a character that was kind of, I think he was completely missing from the last volume. Maybe he was in a little bit, but he came back in this one, and he's one of my favorites. I love him so much. He's a giant goofball. He is the most ridiculous human being ever. But he's so much fun, and I honestly just love him and our main character's relationship, like friendship. I love them. So I'm hoping to see more of that throughout the next few volumes. I'm hoping that the next volume, the 7th one, will have some answers and some ends to some of the stuff that's going on, because I really, if this is how the series ends, I'm going to be so bitter because it started off so well, and if it ends the way that I think it's going to end, I'm not going to be very happy. But again, we're on volume 7 of 10. I've still got 4 left in the series, and it likes to switch very quickly, so I'm thinking I might be okay. But like, it just, there's not a whole lot to say about it because it is the 6th volume of a very long manga series, but I didn't have any like icky feelings like I did with the last one, so generally it was better, but there, I don't know, we're just in this plot line that I'm not a huge fan of, so I'm hoping we go to a different one soon. But I still love all these characters with all of my heart, even the ones that are pissing me off. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. I read it. Still not my favorite, but much better than the last one. The next book that I ended up picking up was my middle grade for the month, and that was A Sprinkle of Sorcery by Michelle Harrison. This is the 2nd in her Pinch of Magic series that, as of right now, has 4 books in it. And it follows the I can never get the name right, Widishin sisters, and it's these 3 girls, these 3 sisters, and this is just the next step in their adventure, and it's been a long time since I read the first one. However, I immediately jumped back into the story. I fell in love with these girls all over again. These stories are so whimsical and fun, and like you get sucked into the story so quickly. This one specifically has a very kind of piratey ship on an ocean journey kind of vibe, so if that's your book, then this is definitely for you. I think it does a very good job of wrapping up, kind of reminding you things that happened in the last book without spoiling the first book. They do kind of go on this adventure, just the 3 of them, to figure some stuff out, and it's really fun. Like I said, they're whimsical stories. I absolutely love these sisters. They really take you on the adventure with them. So like while I'm reading this, like I'm kind of forgetting that I'm reading a book and I'm not just sucked into the story wholeheartedly with these girls, because it's just like back-to-back adventures. You're always doing something without it feeling very, very rushed and very, very chaotic. You're still having a very good story at the same time. And the twist at the end, I did not see coming. Like, it happened and I still had to sit there and I go, wait, what did I just read? It was so good. And like, I don't even know how to explain this series to you, because it's just pure fun. Like, honestly, you're sitting there and you're reading and you're going on this adventure with these sisters, and it's so much fun. And this one definitely has a sea pirate vibe. So I love them so very much. I gave this 5 stars, obviously, because they're amazing. And I'm hoping that the audiobook for the third one will come out in the US soon, because I think the audiobook for this one recently came out, which is why I was able to find it. And I find it more enjoyable to have the audiobook for these stories, because the narrator, first off, is amazing. I think she does a fantastic job at these stories. And while these are middle grade stories, it doesn't matter what age you are, you get sucked in so quickly. And I feel like anyone can enjoy these books if you like a good whimsical adventure. So I love them. Honestly, if you guys have not read Pinch of Magic or anything in the series, you need to, because they're amazing. And I know that the first 2 are for sure out in the US. I'm not sure about the third one. It might be, but I might have made that up. But I'm pretty sure the third one's out. But I mean, you can get them on Book Depository. That's how I get them. So read it. Please, please, please read it. So the next one is a reread for me, so I won't go into too much detail, but that is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, the first in the Crescent City series. I read this in preparation for the second one, which I'm still currently reading. I keep putting it off. That's a side story. But I ended up giving this one 5 stars. Again, I mean, are we surprised at all? I immediately had this feeling of being at home. Like, you know those good books that you loved so much that when you go back into the story or back into the world, you just kind of feel at home? That's what this book felt like to me. Like, I forgot how much I adored the characters in here, and I really enjoyed reading it again, because there's a lot of stuff world building wise that I did not pick up on the first time. This is definitely a good book to reread, because first time I was so focused on the plot and what was going on that I didn't it didn't click for me on some of the world things until the very, very end. And then the second time I read this, more world things clicked. I mean, a couple of things clicked earlier on, but then there were things that I just didn't even pick up on at all. And there's a lot of like mythology surrounding this world that is very complex. So I would highly suggest, if you are a fan of the series, to look up Becca from Becca in the Book. She did a whole video in preparation for the second book, kind of summing up what happens in this book. And she gets all the little details. So I would suggest looking at that video if you are confused at all, because this is a very dense world. But I adored going back into it, because there were definitely things, like there are moments that I had tabbed that I hadn't tabbed the first time. And there, like I said, were a lot of plot and world things that I didn't pick up the first time. And there was a lot of moments between Hunt and Bryce that like made my heart happy, and like there were moments that it was just really fantastic. But there's a lot about the middle that I had completely forgotten about. So I think rereading this was very helpful for the second book, because Sarah J. Maas likes to have little details that seem like they don't mean anything but will come back and be very important. So I'm really glad that I ended up rereading this one, and 5 stars, obviously. I loved it. Again, the next book that I picked up was an ARC that I had on NetGalley that I actually read before it came out, and that is Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. Like I said, this is an ARC, so I do have a Goodreads review that I will leave down below that will definitely go into much greater detail. So she's fallen on hard times. She doesn't have a job anymore. She doesn't have the boyfriend anymore. She doesn't have a place to live anymore. And so she ends up moving in with her brother and her brother's roommate. And one night she gets this random text from a wrong number, and she starts a conversation with them, and it turns into like a really fun, like random conversation, and it turns out, fun fact, This person who accidentally texted her is the roommate that's living with her brother, who she has grown up thinking honestly is the worst person ever and definitely hates her. So it's the two of them, and this was just pure fun. I loved every second of this book. I thought it was so much fun watching our main character really just come into her own, and really get what she wants out of life, because she has been struggling for a long time, and so it's really about her finding herself and finding her groove and what that would kind of be for her. But yeah, the conversations between our characters, who I realized I never named them, but they're Olivia and Colin, are some of my favorite parts. Like, honestly, I want to read other things by this author because the banter in those scenes is just pure gold. I loved it so much. So it was so much fun seeing the two of them. I fell head over heels in love with the characters. My only complaint on this book is that there was something that happened at the very, very end that was never talked about. Like, I don't know how to say this as vaguely as possible without spoiling anything, but there's a plot thing that happens that spurs one of the very last moments in this book, and then it's never talked about again, and we just kind of like skip to the epilogue. And I'm like, are we gonna talk about this little specific thing that's gonna happen? But they never do, and I have a couple of questions about that. Why was that not wrapped up? It was a pretty big thing to not wrap up. So even though I did give this book 5 stars, that ending had like one little bit of nugget of information that was never wrapped up, and it drove me crazy. But beyond that, this was honestly pure fun. If you want a good, fun romance, enemies to lovers, that kind of thing, this is perfect. I believe that this is out by the time that you're seeing this, so definitely check it out, because I highly recommend. I think anyone will really enjoy this kind of like bantery. They're just so cute. They were just so cute. The next one I picked up was a novella in the Spindle Cove series by Tessa Dare, which was Beauty and the Blacksmith. So this was like 3.5 in the series that I read with my friends Taylor and Brooke. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. It was my favorite up to this point as well. Like, I swear, it just gets better and better with each one. So trigger warnings for death of a loved one, just as a heads up. But this follows one of the girls in the town whose mom is obsessed with her marrying and wants her to marry very, very well, even if that's not something that she wants. And so she has feelings for the local blacksmith in the town, and it's the two of them. And I love this because they are so adult about it, and they have adult conversations, and like, he trusts her to make up her mind. So whenever they get in like situations, he'll go, look, I trust you to make up your own mind. If this is what you want, then we'll do this specific thing, whatever they're talking about. We'll do this thing, but I trust you to have like made up your own mind of what you want. And I just love that, because you don't see that a lot in historical romances, of the girls kind of being trusted that they know their own mind, and it was just very beautiful to see. So this was a very, very short novella. There's not a whole lot to say about it, but it was so freaking cute. I loved our two main characters. I loved them. I loved them a lot. I do think that he's probably one of the best written heroes I've read in quite a while, definitely in this series. Again, just like the mutual respect between the two of them to know their own minds, I really appreciated. There's a couple of things that happened at the very end that, like, motivation-wise on his part, I was like, okay, why would you do that? But mostly I really appreciated them. It was a very adult relationship where, like, they actually communicated with each other, which you don't see a lot in romances. You don't see a lot in historical romances, period, but you still don't see it a lot in contemporary romances either, so it was really nice to have that, see that, and I just, seriously, so cute. I love them so much. Yeah. So the next four are all part of the kind of secret TBR I did last month, my BookTube episode 2. I'll leave it linked above if you'd like to check it out. I'm going to kind of rapidly go through them because I did talk about them in that video quite extensively. The first one was Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. This was just a cute romance between two people who work in news. You got a weather girl and a sports guy, and the two of them basically kind of get together to get their bosses together, and in doing so, it strikes up a relationship between them. But our main female lead has depression, and it's a very big part of her life. She takes antidepressants for it. It's very much treated, but it's such a big part of her life that it's a constant conversation, which I loved seeing that representation in this book, because you don't see it very often, at least in the books that I have read. You see very often like there being an issue and talking about it being an issue, whereas this one, it was like, it's a part of my daily life. I'm gonna have good days, I'm gonna have bad days. It's just who I am. And while it was part of the plot, in a sense, it wasn't really like, I don't know, it just felt very, very normalized. And while I can't speak from like someone who would be able to say whether it was good or bad rep, it was very important, I think, to see it from this angle of just like, hey, this is part of my life. It's gonna be here. I just have to deal with it, which I think a lot of people could probably relate to. So I adored them. I thought this, again, was a very adult relationship. They actually talked about most of their problems, but it was really cute, and I loved them. The next one that I picked up for this video was the Bromance Book Club by Lisa K. Adams. This is the first in this series. I ended up giving this one, I think, 4 stars? Yeah, 4.5 stars, because I really didn't like the main character for most of this book. So Gavin, let me back up. This follows a baseball star named Gavin and his wife, who were having some marriage issues, and she throws around the divorce word. He kind of freaks out about that a little bit, and he gets invited to be part of this group of guys who they are termed the Bromance Book Club, and it's all of these like athletes and politicians and like the who's who of Nashville, kind of, and they read books to understand their wives, girlfriends, partners, whatever, better. And so he is given this second chance romance historical fiction to read, and it's very interesting because like I loved seeing the two of them grow, especially from like about the halfway point of the book on. But seriously, the first half of the book, I just wanted to throw Gavin out a window. He was really annoying. This has a lot of moments of like very alpha male kind of characters where they're like, I don't know how to explain it, but like it was really cute to see these very alpha male characters be very in touch with their feelings, which you don't see a lot in certain situations. So I really appreciated that. I loved the book club aspect itself. I didn't love Gavin until, like I said, about halfway through the book. That's when I actually started to care for him, but we did get some pretty decent character growth between our characters. And if you like second chance romances about married couples who have kids and they're trying to figure stuff out, this is definitely a good one. It also has some very steamy scenes, which is pretty good. So yeah, that's pretty good. Then my favorite book out of that series was Heidi's Guide to 4-Letter Words by Tara Civic and Andy Arnst. So this is just a beautiful story, honestly. And it follows Heidi, who has been a teacher her entire life, and she gets let go because the school system is having trouble with money. So they had to let some of their teachers go, and there's a hiring freeze, and she just happened to be one of the ones who go. So she ends up finding this kind of administrative position, secretarial, front desk, that kind of thing, at a recording studio. So she goes in, gets hired, is very excited about it. Then she discovers that this is a recording studio for audiobooks, specifically erotic romances, which she's never read before. And so you've got that whole thing, and it's like opening up her horizon, but you've also got her first day there. They're getting rid of some podcast equipment, some like recording equipment and stuff. And so they basically say, here, take it home, throw it away. If you don't mind, just kind of get rid of it. And so she ends up taking it home and starts a random podcast, which is called Heidi's Discount Erotica. And on it, you can really see her grow from this person who was too scared to do anything, like, oh, I don't know, ask her neighbor out, who she thinks is super cute, to someone who will read like pretty dirty scenes on these podcasts. And so it was really cute to see this very kind of it's not coming of age, but like finding yourself story. And it's super, super cute. And it's seriously one of my favorite romances at this point. I loved Heidi. She was a hot, bumbling mess, which I feel like is relatable. And her relationship that she's growing, like she makes friends along the way. Like there's an erotic romance author that is coming in because her husband is narrating some of her books, and so she comes in, like they strike up a friendship, and it's cute to see that. We also see her really starting to step out of her comfort zone with a guy, and it's super cute. but at the same time, some of these scenes are significantly sexier than I was anticipating going in, having heard some of like the beginning of the story, which was really cheesy and fun, and then all of a sudden we had some very steamy scenes. So it's got everything, honestly. I really, really loved it. So yeah, this one got 5 stars. It is one of my favorite romances now, like of all time. I love it. So good. And then the last book that I ended up reading for this little video was If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy, which I gave 4 stars to. This is a Cinderella retelling of sorts. We follow our main character, Cindy, who is trying to get her she's trying to get a design job. She went to school in New York for design and hasn't gotten anything since she graduated, so she moves home with her mom, or her stepmom and her step siblings. And her stepmom is the executive producer on this reality TV show, reality dating show that's Bachelor style reality dating show. So she ends up going on the show, and she's the first plus size woman this season, but also ever. And so it's her and just her experience through this. She did it to get exposure, so like people would maybe hire her as a designer, and it's kind of walking that fine line between what is real and what isn't. So it was very cute. It wasn't my favorite thing I've ever read, but it did have some super cute moments. I thought it was very interesting to watch this plus size person in fashion, because you really don't see that very often, and I loved that kind of representation in here. So this was quite cute. I really enjoyed my time reading this. I do love our characters. I think they're pretty cute, and I really liked seeing a different look at, kind of like a backstage, behind the scene look at reality TV shows and how real versus not real they are. So I thought this was quite cute, and I'm glad I picked it up. I then very randomly, spur of the moment, did a buddy read of A Rogue by Any Other Name by Sarah McLean with my friend Taylor. She was actually reading this book, and I had it at my library, so I joined her. This ended up getting 3.5 stars. It was not my favorite, and that is because of the main character, like the main male lead. He walked that fine line between general jerk and bully really well, and he tended to go into bully territory way more than I was comfortable with him going in. Like, I don't know, there was just some scenes and stuff that, like, I felt like there was nothing to redeem. Like, he just, I don't know, there were some issues here. But it basically follows our main 2 characters, and our main girl, her father attached this land to her dowry because she was getting older, and she had had a kind of scandalous engagement with this duke that fell through, and then she just kind of was not, basically she was starting to get a little too old to get married, so he attached this land to her in the hopes that it would bring some people to actually like propose to her. And this land used to be our main male lead's, but he lost it, and so to get it back he has to marry her. So he basically forces her to marry him, and it's their relationship. And so it's the first in a series that follows these 4 guys that are the owners of this pub, or this gambling den of sorts, and so he just happens to be one of these 4, and it's the 2 of their stories. And it did have its really cute moments. I did like parts of it. I feel like the ending was pretty cute when it came down to it, but I don't know, it just, like, it felt like he was a jerk for most of this book, and then all of a sudden he cared again, and that felt a little weird. The best part in this was their meet cute, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it was, yeah, that was the best part. So, will I continue with the series? Honestly, probably, because I'm very interested in the 2nd and the 4th book in the series. But that's because, like, I feel like those those male leads are significantly better than our male lead in this one, because, like, even in this book, they were part of it telling our male character what an idiot he was being for just some of the things that he was doing to his wife, and or not doing to his wife, and just, like, the lack of empathy that he had towards her. And so I feel like they'll be better to read from. But yeah, not the best buddy read, or not the best read I've ever had. Great buddy read, but not the best read I've ever had. But I still enjoyed it. It did have some good moments. Just, there are definitely better books out there. And then I finished off the month with Where the Drowned Girls Go by Shauna McGuire. This is the most recent in the Wayward Children's series, and I read this one with my lovely friend Teresa, who we've read the entire series together of the Wayward Children series, but also she gifted me this book, so thank you, Teresa, again. So this is a series that follows basically kids who go through doors, like the kids from Darnia, Alice from Alice in Wonderland. They have doors and they go through them, and sometimes the world that they go to kicks them back out to the world they came from. And so it follows this home called Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, who are children who went through the doors, have come back to the world that they grew up in, and are basically just waiting around for their doors to reopen again for them to go back. And it's pretty good. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I read it over a weekend. And it was really cool because it follows a character that we came to know for the first time in the 3rd book, and then came back in the 5th book as well. So it's one that, like, we've seen a couple times. I honestly love her. Her name is Cora. I think she's fantastic. But she is plus sized, and that's a huge part of this plot. And, like, I felt like there was a ridiculous amount of, like, fat shaming in this book that did not need to be there. Because, like, it's a big part of who she is when she grew up. Like, it kind of talks about her time before she went through her door. But I don't know, it just, like, it felt like there was just a lot there that didn't need to be there. So she is at the Wayward Children's home and decides that she can't be there anymore. She wants to go to a different home, and so there is actually one that is significantly not nice compared to this one, and so she moves there, and it's her experience at this other home. And it was actually really cool to see a few different doors and, like, different worlds that we'd not been exposed to before. We did have a character named Reagan, who was actually the main character in the last book, the 6th one, Across the Greengrass Fields. So it was cool to see her show up, and, like, there's a couple of characters that we really have already known, and just some new ones, and just a new situation, because just the idea of having this different world not this different world, but, like, this different school is just really interesting to me. But I don't really have a whole lot to say on this book, just because, like, first off, they're super short, but, like, I don't know, like, I felt like it was really good. I enjoyed my time reading it. I gave it, 4.5 stars, but I don't, like, there's not a lot to say about the book. It's kind of forgettable as one of them, which is unfortunate because I love Cora's character. And so I hope that she continues in some of the next few books, at least as a side character, because she's quickly becoming one of my favorites. But that is all I have for you guys today. This was quite a video. There's quite a few books to get through, so thank you for making it to the end if you have. And if you're watching this, leave the wave. Like, there should be, like, a wave emoji, right? Because the last book, What If the Drowned Girls, that one, is about water. So leave the wave emoji. But if you have read any of the books that I have mentioned in today's video, let me know your thoughts. I'd love to chat with you about them down below. Or just tell me something that you read in the month of February. Did you have any readathons that you participated in? Let me know how it went. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so don't forget to check all of that out, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!